The debris field had no name. It was just a number on old star charts, a graveyard of metal left over from a battle nobody living remembered. Dana Whitfield did not care about names. She cared about what could be sold, melted down, or fixed and sold again. That was the job. That was how the Kestrel's debt stayed in the sky. Her ship moved slow through the wreckage, lights sweeping over broken hulls that once belonged to something proud and dangerous. Owen sat beside her, eyes on the scanner, one boot tapping the floor the way it always did when he was nervous. "This is old war junk," he said. "Whatever ship this was, it did not go down easy." "Old junk still has good parts," Dana said. "Copper does not care who used to own it." The scanner beeped, not the usual beep for metal or wire. This one was soft and steady, like a heartbeat. Owen frowned at the screen. "That is not a machine signal." Dana leaned over his shoulder and watched the small green light pulse on the scanner. Slow, warm, alive. They found it near the crushed remains of what looked like a control room, half buried under a broken wall. A sealed pod, dented but not broken, sitting quiet in the dark like it had been waiting. "Do not touch it," Owen said. "We do not know what it is. Could be a weapon, could be a trap." Dana crouched beside it anyway. The metal was warm under her glove, which made no sense, since the whole ship had been dead and cold in space for who knew how many years. "Weapons do not have a heartbeat," she said. She pulled the release lever before Owen could stop her. The pod hissed open, releasing a cloud of white mist. Inside, resting in a bed of soft padding, were 3 eggs. They were large, the size of a grown man's head, with leathery skin the color of dark storm clouds. Faint lines of light moved under the surface of each one, slow and steady, like breathing. Owen took a step back. "Dana, those are not junk. Those are not scrap metal. Whatever laid those eggs was not human, and it is not going to be happy we opened its nest." "Whatever laid them is probably dead," Dana said quietly. "Look at this place. Nothing is left alive here except these 3. She reached out and touched one of the eggs. It was warm, warmer than it should have been in the cold of space. Something inside shifted, just slightly, like it knew she was there. "We cannot just leave them," she said. "Salvage law says anything organic and unknown gets reported," Owen said. "You know that. If the wrong people find out we picked up alien eggs and did not report them, that is real trouble." Dana straightened up, looking at him with the kind of face that ended most arguments before they really started. "Owen, I have known you 11 years. Tell me honestly, if you leave this room right now and these things die out here alone in the dark, are you going to sleep fine tonight?" Owen did not answer right away. He looked at the eggs, at the soft moving light under their shells, and let out a long breath. "No," he admitted, "I would not." They carried the pod back to the ship together, careful with every step, like it might break if they moved too fast. Dana logged it in the ship's records as biological samples, unidentified origin. It was not a lie, it just was not the whole truth either. The trip back to Wren's Anchor took 6 days. Dana kept the pod in her own quarters, checking on it more than she needed to, listening to that slow, soft heartbeat sound every night before she slept. She told herself it was just curiosity. She told herself a lot of things. Wren's Anchor was not much to look at from the outside. It was an old mining station, patched together with parts from a dozen different ships over the years, home to people who did not fit anywhere else in the galaxy. Drifters, orphans, families who had lost everything once and built something new out of scrap and stubbornness. It was not fancy, but it was home, and home was something the people there took seriously. When Dana brought the pod aboard, word spread fast, the way it always did on a station where everyone knew everyone. People gathered outside the medical bay, whispering, guessing what could be inside. Some thought it was some rare mineral. Some thought Dana had finally lost her mind hauling mystery cargo across half the sector. Nobody guessed eggs. Nobody guessed that inside those 3 shells were lives that would change everything the station thought it knew about family, home, and what it meant to belong somewhere. That night, alone in the med bay, Dana sat beside the pod with a cup of cold tea she had forgotten to drink. The lights under the shells were moving faster now, brighter, pulsing in a pattern that almost looked like breathing quickening before waking up. A thin crack appeared on the surface of the first egg, then a second, then the third. Dana leaned closer, heart pounding, as a small clawed shape pushed weakly against the inside of the shell. "Well," she whispered, "here we go." The crack spread wider. A soft, unsteady sound came from inside, not quite a cry, not quite anything Dana had ever heard before. Something was waking up, something that had drifted lost and orphaned through the dark of space and was about to open its eyes for the first time in a place it had never been meant to find. Home, the first thing the smallest hatchling saw was a woman's tired face, lit orange by the dim glow of a broken ceiling light. The second thing it saw was that the face was smiling. Dana had not planned on staying up all night watching 3 baby dragons crack out of their shells, but there she was, sleeves rolled up, hands sticky with egg fluid, laughing quietly to herself because she did not know what else to do with the feeling in her chest. The first one out was loud from the very start, snapping at the air with tiny sharp teeth before it could even stand. The second one hatched slower, watching everything with narrow, careful eyes before making a single sound. The third one did not fight its way out at all. It simply pushed the shell open gently and looked up at Dana like it was asking permission to exist. "Well," Dana said, wiping her hands on her jacket, "you 3 are trouble already." By morning, half the station had heard the news, and by evening, half the station had come to see for themselves. People crowded the hallway outside the med bay, careful not to get too close, whispering about scales and claws and eyes that glowed faintly in the dark. Owen stood near the door with his arms crossed, still not fully convinced this was a good idea. "You know we cannot keep calling them Sample 1, Sample 2, and Sample 3 forever." Dana looked down at the 3 small creatures curled together in a nest of old blankets. The loud one was already trying to climb over its siblings. The quiet one was chewing thoughtfully on the edge of a blanket. The gentle one was simply watching, always watching. "That one," Dana said, pointing at the loud one, "reminds me of a story I used to tell. About a fox who thought he was the smartest thing in the forest, always jumping in before he thought things through. We will call him Fable." She moved to the quiet one next. "This one is careful, watches before it moves, like ash before a fire settles, cinder." Last she looked at the smallest, the gentle one, who had crawled a little closer to her hand without seeming to notice it was doing so. "And you," she said softly, "you drift along quiet like smoke, wisp." The names stuck immediately, the way good names do. Weeks turned into months, and the 3 hatchlings grew fast, faster than any normal animal should. What started as creatures the size of house cats soon became something closer to small children, walking on 2 legs, learning words, learning laughter. Their scales shimmered faintly under the station lights, deep colors of stormcloud gray, ember red, and pale silver. Owen was the one who noticed it first, the strange hum between them. He found Fable stuck under a loose floor panel one afternoon, and before Owen even called for help, Cinder came running from 2 hallways away, as if she had heard something nobody else could. "They know things about each other," Owen said later, sitting across from Dana in the mess hall. "Without talking, without seeing, I do not like not understanding something living on my station." "You do not have to understand it," Dana said. "You just have to not be cruel about it." Not everyone on the station agreed at first. Some worried what the hatchlings might grow into. Some worried what kind of danger might come looking for creatures like that eventually. But most people, in the slow and quiet way that communities decide things, simply started treating the 3 like they treated any other station kid, because that was what they were. An old mechanic named Harlan took a liking to Cinder, letting her sit beside him while he worked on engines. Letting her tiny, clawed hands hold tools twice her size. She barely spoke, but she watched every movement he made, and within a year she could name every part of an engine better than most adult crew members. Fable, true to his name, got into more trouble than anyone else on the station combined. He squeezed into vents meant for wiring, startled 3 separate work crews by popping out of storage lockers, and once managed to short out half the lighting on the lower deck by chewing on a cable he had been specifically told not to touch. Wisp stayed close to Dana most days, curling up near her feet while she worked, or sitting quietly with the younger station children during lessons, listening more than speaking, but always the first to notice if someone else was upset. By the time a full year had passed, nobody on Wren's anchor called them samples anymore. Nobody called them dangerous or strange or alien. They called them Fable, Cinder, and Wisp. They called them kids. One evening, Dana stood at the observation window with all three of them gathered around her, watching the stars stretch out endless and dark beyond the station's hull. Fable pressed his small clawed hand against the glass. Cinder leaned quietly against Dana's side. Wisp simply held Dana's hand, saying nothing at all, needing nothing more than to be close. "Do you know what you are?" Dana asked softly, more to herself than to them. None of them answered, because none of them knew yet. But somewhere out among those same stars, a much older and much colder power already did. The trader's ship smelled like burnt oil and old spices, and the trader himself, a thin, nervous man named Feld, had been doing business at Wren's anchor for years without ever causing trouble. That was why nobody expected the trouble he brought that particular morning. He had come to sell parts, same as always, laying out old tech on a table in the market deck. Fable, now old enough to walk on two legs full-time and talk in full sentences, had wandered over out of simple curiosity, the way he wandered over to almost everything. Feld looked up at him, and his face went pale. "You," he said, voice shaking, "where did you come from?" Fable blinked. "I live here." Feld's eyes moved over Fable's face, his bone structure, the faint shimmer of his scales beneath his shirt collar. His hands started to tremble as he reached for an old data slate in his bag, flipping through pages until he found what he was looking for. He turned the slate around so Fable could see it. It was an image, old, grainy, clearly copied many times over. But the shape in the image, the horned skull, the sharp jaw, the pattern along the brow, matched Fable almost exactly. "That is a Skorath," Feld whispered. "A royal line Skorath. I have seen pictures like this in old war records. Boy, do you have any idea what you are." By the time Dana heard about it, half the market deck had already gathered around, whispering, staring at Fable like he had grown a second head. She pushed through the crowd and pulled Fable close to her side. "That is enough," she said sharply. "Show is over." But it was not over, not really. Word like that did not stay quiet on a station as small and close as Wren's anchor. That night Dana called a meeting in the mess hall. Fable, Cinder, and Wisp sat together at one table, Cinder's arms crossed, Wisp's hands folded tightly in her lap, Fable unusually still for once in his life. Owen stood near the back with a stack of old records Feld had reluctantly left behind. "The Skorath Dominion," Owen said slowly, reading from the pages, "is a species of dragonkin, old empire, strict rules, big on honor and bloodlines. Records say a Dominion scout ship went missing in this sector years back, believed destroyed, no survivors reported." "Except there were," Dana said quietly, "3 of them." Cinder's eyes narrowed. "You are saying we are not just some animal that got hatched by accident. You are saying we belong to some kingdom out there." "I am saying your blood does," Dana said carefully. "I am not saying you belong to anyone." Fable, for once, did not look excited about being the center of attention. He looked confused, staring down at his own clawed hands like he was seeing them for the first time. "If they are real," he said slowly, "if this Dominion thing is real and we came from royal blood, does that make us important somewhere else, somewhere better than here?" The words strung more than Fable probably meant them too. Dana kept her face steady, even though something in her chest tightened painfully. "Being royal blood does not automatically make a place better," she said. "It just makes it different." Wisp finally spoke, voice small. "What happens if they come looking for us?" Nobody had a good answer for that. The records Feld left behind painted a clear picture over the following days. The Skorath Dominion did not simply forget lost bloodline heirs. Ancient law demanded any surviving royal hatchling be recovered, trained, and tested through something called the Trials of Ascension, a brutal proving ground that decided worth and rank among their kind. Refusal, according to the old texts, was considered a stain on family honor, something rarely tolerated and rarely forgiven. Owen argued for caution, suggesting they quietly move the three hatchlings to a different station, somewhere less likely to be found. Dana refused. "Running teaches them that who they are is something to hide," she said. "I did not raise cowards. I am not about to start now." Cinder, ever practical, spent the following nights reading through every scrap of Dominion history she could get her claws on, determined to understand exactly what kind of storm might be coming toward the only home she had ever known. Fable grew quieter than usual, caught somewhere between excitement and fear, imagining grand halls and glory one moment and the thought of leaving Wren's anchor the next. Wisp stayed close to Dana almost constantly, as if trying to memorize the feeling of safety before it could possibly be taken away. 3 weeks after Feld's visit, the station's long-range scanner picked up a signal unlike anything Wren's anchor had ever recorded. A ship, sleek and fast, moving with the kind of confidence that came from never once worrying about being challenged. Owen's voice cracked slightly over the intercom as he made the announcement. "Dana, you need to see this. Something big just entered the system, and it is heading straight for us." Out among the stars, the ship grew closer, its hull marked with old symbols of an empire that had waited years to reclaim what it believed was rightfully its own. And aboard the ship, an officer named Rask Var stood at the viewport, staring toward the small, unimportant human station ahead, utterly certain that whatever he found there would kneel before the crown he served. He had no idea how wrong he was about to be. Rask Var had commanded ships far larger and far more important than this small errand, but the old king himself had given this task personally, which meant failure was simply not a word Rask Var allowed himself to consider. His herald ship docked at Wren's anchor with a hiss of pressurized air, and when the doors opened, he stepped out in full ceremonial armor, dark scales polished, horns capped in gold, every inch of him built to remind lesser beings exactly what standing before Dominion nobility meant. The station's docking bay had never held so many people at once, all of them staring, none of them bowing, which Rask Var noted with quiet, simmering irritation. Dana stood at the front of the crowd, arms crossed, unimpressed by gold horns or polished armor. Beside her stood Fable, Cinder, and Wisp, dressed simply, looking small compared to the towering officer in front of them, though none of them looked away. "I am Rask Var," the officer announced, voice booming across the bay, "herald of the Skorath Dominion, sworn servant of the crown. I have come to reclaim 3 royal hatchlings, lost to the Empire many years past and presumed dead." "They are not lost," Dana said calmly. "They are found. They live here with us." Rask Var's eyes narrowed slightly, studying her the way one might study an insect that had unexpectedly spoken. "You are human. You have no claim over Dominion bloodline. These hatchlings belong to the throne, by law and by blood, regardless of where fate scattered them." "They belong to themselves," Dana said, "same as anyone else." A ripple of tension moved through the crowd. Rask Var turned his attention fully toward the 3 hatchlings for the first time, studying each of them carefully, the way a jeweler might study stones pulled from rough stone. "You," he said to Fable, "carry the mark of House Draveth on your brow, strong bloodline, proud line of warriors." His gaze shifted to Cinder. "You carry sharp eyes, careful instincts. A tactician's line." Finally, his eyes settled on Wisp, and something in his expression softened only slightly. "And you, smallest one, carry the old healing bloodline, rare among our people now." Fable's chest puffed up slightly at the mention of warriors. Cinder's arms stayed crossed, unmoved. Wisp simply stepped half a pace closer to Dana. "You have grown up among strangers," Rask Var continued, "eating strange food, speaking a lesser tongue, unaware of the honor waiting for you across the stars. I have brought recordings, so you may see for yourselves what you were meant to become." He gestured, and a small floating screen activated beside him, displaying images of towering stone halls, rows of dragonkin in ceremonial armor, great fires burning atop ancient towers, and crowds bowing before a throne carved from black stone. This, Raskvar said, is your true home, a place of honor, strength, and belonging among your own kind. Fable stared at the images longer than his siblings, something unreadable crossing his face. Cinder watched with narrowed eyes, unconvinced. Wisp barely looked at the screen at all, her attention fixed instead on Dana's hand resting protectively on her shoulder. They already have a home, Dana said firmly, stepping forward. This one, whatever you think they are owed by blood, you do not get to just take them without asking what they want. Raskvar's expression darkened. You presume to speak for royal line hatchlings, human. Their opinion is not required, only their bloodline. Then ask them anyway, Dana said. If your empire is so proud, so honorable, prove it. Let them speak for themselves. For a long moment, Raskvar said nothing, clearly unused to being challenged so plainly. Around him, the crowd of humans watched silently, waiting. Finally, something shifted behind his golden eyes, not agreement exactly, but curiosity. Very well, he said slowly. Dominion law does recognize an old custom, rarely used in recent generations, the trial of choosing. A hatchling of proven age may formally declare their path before witnesses of both bloodlines. The choice, once spoken, is binding, even upon the throne itself. Then that is what we will do, Dana said. Raskvar studied her for a long moment, something almost like respect flickering across his stern features. You would risk losing them entirely, human, on the strength of a single spoken choice. I am not risking anything, Dana said. I trust them. The words landed heavier in the room than Dana perhaps intended, and for the first time, Raskvar looked toward the three hatchlings not as lost royal property, but as something closer to what they actually were. Young, uncertain, watched over. 3 days, Raskvar said finally. The trial will be held here, witnessed by my crew and your people both. Use the time to prepare yourselves, hatchlings. Choose wisely. Choose with pride in your blood. He turned sharply and returned to his ship, armor gleaming under the docking bay lights, leaving behind a silence that stretched long after the door had closed behind him. Fable stared at the closed door for a long moment before finally speaking, voice quieter than usual. 3 days, he repeated, 3 days to decide everything. Cinder placed a steady hand on his shoulder. Then we better make sure we actually know what we are deciding. Wisp said nothing at all, simply reaching for Dana's hand and holding on tightly, as if 3 days suddenly felt like far too little time. 3 days felt very short and very long at the same time, depending on the hour. Fable spent the first day walking through every part of the station he could reach, as if trying to memorize it before it could be taken from him. He stood in the vent he used to hide in as a child, now far too small for him to fit inside anymore. He visited the storage locker he had once gotten stuck in for an entire afternoon, laughing quietly at the memory, even though nobody was there to share the laugh with him. He found himself, eventually, standing outside the market deck, where Feld had first shown him that old grainy image of a stranger's face that matched his own. He touched his brow gently, feeling the faint ridges beneath his skin that Raskvar had called the mark of House Draveth. Strong bloodline, Raskvar had said, proud line of warriors. Fable did not feel proud of a bloodline he had never known. He felt proud of the time Harlan had trusted him to hold a wrench steady during an engine repair. He felt proud of the time he had talked a scared younger station kid down from a panic during a power outage. Pride, he was starting to realize, did not automatically come from blood. Sometimes it had to be earned in small, unglamorous moments. Cinder spent her 3 days differently, quieter, more focused. She found Harlan in the engine bay, exactly where she always found him, and without a word, picked up a tool and got to work beside him like she had done nearly every day since she was small enough to be carried there. You do not have to do this today, Harlan said gently, watching her work. Nobody would blame you for resting instead. I want to, Cinder said simply. If I am going to choose something in 3 days, I want my hands busy while I think about it. They worked side by side in comfortable silence for hours, the way they always had, and by the end of it, The old engine ran smoother than it had in months. Cinder stepped back, studying her work, feeling something settle firmly inside her chest. "Blood tells you where you came from," she said quietly, almost to herself. "It does not tell you where you belong." Wisp, the smallest and quietest of the three, spent her 3 days close to Dana, exactly as she always had. They sat together on the observation deck, watching the stars, saying very little, needing very little said. "Tell me again," Wisp asked softly on the second night, "about the first time you saw us, when we were still eggs." Dana smiled, the memory warm and familiar. "You were the quiet one, even then. The other two cracked out fighting and hollering. You just pushed your shell open gently, like you were asking permission to come into the world." "Was I scared?" "I do not think so," Dana said. "I think you already somehow knew you were safe." Wisp leaned her head against Dana's shoulder, quiet for a long moment. "What if the Dominion is not safe? What if leaving here means I stop feeling that way?" Dana wrapped an arm around her gently. "Then you already know your answer, don't you?" Raskvar, meanwhile, watched the station from a distance more than he wanted to admit, standing near the observation window of his own ship, studying the small, rundown human station he had expected to look upon with nothing but pity. Instead, he found himself watching three hatchlings who did not act like desperate captives waiting to be freed. He watched Fable laughing with a group of station children, showing off small harmless bursts of flame to their delighted amazement. He watched Cinder working diligently beside an old human mechanic, trusted completely with delicate machinery. He watched Wisp sitting quietly beside the human captain, held gently, safely, without a single moment of fear. It did not match anything in the old Dominion records about lesser species. It did not match anything Raskvar had been taught to expect. On the morning of the third day, the entire station gathered in the largest open bay, humans and Dominion crew standing on opposite sides, Raskvar standing tall at the center, three hatchlings brought forward to stand before him. "The trial of choosing begins," Raskvar announced, voice carrying across the silent crowd. "Speak your truth, hatchlings, and let it be witnessed and bound." Fable stepped forward first, standing taller than Dana had ever seen him stand before. "I looked at those pictures of the Dominion," he said, voice steady despite the nerves clearly running through him. "Grand halls, ancient fire, all of it beautiful, but nobody in those pictures ever once asked what the people in them wanted. Here, someone always asks, I choose here." Cinder stepped forward next, calm and certain. "Blood decides where you start. It does not decide where you belong. I belong here, among people who trusted me enough to hand me tools and let me build something with my own 2 hands. I choose here." Wisp stepped forward last, smallest of the three, voice soft, but clear enough for the whole bay to hear. "I do not know much about kingdoms or crowns. I only know that when I was scared, this station held me anyway. That is the only home I have ever needed. I choose here." Silence stretched long across the bay, following the third answer. Raskvar stood motionless, studying the three young hatchlings before him, something complicated moving behind his golden eyes. Slowly, deliberately, he lowered his head, not in defeat exactly, but in something closer to reluctant respect. "The trial of choosing is spoken," he said finally, voice quieter than before, "and by ancient law it is binding, even upon the throne itself." He turned to face Dana directly, studying her for a long moment. "You did not force this outcome, human. You simply allowed it to happen honestly." He paused. "That is more than most of my own people manage when the crown demands otherwise." Dana said nothing, simply reaching out to pull all three hatchlings close against her, holding on tightly as the weight of the last 3 days finally settled into quiet, overwhelming relief. The morning after the trial of choosing, Ren's anchor woke up feeling lighter, the way a place does after a storm has finally passed without doing the damage everyone feared it would. Raskvar stayed one more day before departing, which surprised nearly everyone, including himself. He spent most of that final day quietly observing the station, saying little, watching much. He walked through the market deck without his ceremonial armor, drawing far less attention than he had the day he first arrived. He found Dana in the small office near the docking bay, going over supply records with the tired focus of someone who ran an entire station on too little sleep and too much stubbornness. She looked up as he entered, setting her work aside. "Come to try again?" she asked, not unkindly. "No," Raskvar said. He set a small data drive on her desk. Dominion medical records, historical archives, everything related to their bloodlines, their history, their people. I thought they should have the choice to know it, even if they did not choose to live it. Dana looked at the drive for a long moment before picking it up carefully. "That is a generous thing to offer after everything." "It is not generosity," Raskvar said. "It is respect. A rare thing, apparently, that your people manage without needing an ancient law to force it out of them." He turned to leave, then paused at the doorway, considering his next words carefully before speaking them. In the Dominion, children are told what they will become before they are old enough to disagree. We call it strength. Perhaps it is closer to fear, dressed up in old traditions. He looked back at her. "Your people ask your children what they want. I did not expect that to matter more than a crown. I was wrong." He left without waiting for a response, boots echoing down the corridor toward his waiting ship. By the time the Herald vessel undocked and disappeared back into the stars, most of the station had already returned to the ordinary rhythm of daily life, though something had clearly shifted, quiet but permanent, in the way people looked at the three hatchlings now. That evening, the mess hall filled with more people than it had in years, someone having decided, without much official planning, that the occasion called for a celebration. Tables were pushed together. Food appeared from every corner of the station, some of it good, some of it clearly made in a hurry, all of it eaten happily regardless. Fable stood near the center of the room. A small crowd of station children gathered eagerly around him, watching as he carefully breathed small, controlled bursts of flame into the air, shaping them into simple glowing shapes that made the younger kids gasp and clap every time. He laughed freely, easily, the nervous tension of the past week finally gone from his shoulders. Cinder sat near Harlan, finishing the last small repair on the very same engine they had worked on together during the 3 days of waiting. She wiped grease from her hands, studying the machine with quiet satisfaction. "Good work," Harlan said, patting the engine fondly. "Runs better now than it has in 10 years. "Runs better because we did it together," Cinder said simply, and Harlan smiled, understanding exactly what she meant by it. Wisp sat curled quietly beside Dana near the edge of the room, watching the celebration unfold with the same soft, careful attention she always carried. Dana glanced down at her after a while, noticing the small, peaceful smile resting on her face. "You are quiet tonight," Dana said gently. "I am happy," Wisp said. "Sometimes happy feels quiet." Dana pulled her a little closer, resting her chin lightly atop Wisp's head, watching the warm chaos of the celebration continue around them. Fable's laughter, Cinder's steady pride, Wisp's quiet peace. 3 very different hatchlings, grown from 3 very different eggs, each finding their own way to feel the exact same thing. Home. Later that night, long after most of the station had gone quiet, Dana stood alone at the observation window, watching the stars stretch endlessly beyond the hull, same as she had the very first night she brought 3 unhatched eggs aboard her ship. Back then, she had not known what she was bringing home. She had only known she could not leave them behind. Looking back now, she realized it had never really been about bloodlines or ancient kingdoms or the weight of some old crown waiting across the stars. It had simply been about showing up again and again in the small quiet ways that mattered, teaching, trusting, asking instead of demanding, loving without needing a reason as grand as royal blood to justify it. Somewhere behind her, faint laughter still echoed from the mess hall, mixing with the low hum of the station's old engines, steady and familiar as a heartbeat. 3 hatchlings had been offered a kingdom built on gold and glory and ancient tradition. They had looked at it honestly, weighed it fairly, and chosen instead a rundown station held together by patched metal and stubborn love. They had not needed a crown to know where they belonged. They had already found it, long before anyone came looking to take it away.